Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler. On this week's episode, we're going to go over some top headlines here in the world of mixed martial arts. We're going to recap UFC Fight Night Condit Vs Alves, and then we're going to pick the main card fights for UFC Fight Night Boetsch versus Henderson from New Orleans this Saturday on Fox Sports 1, where the Juice will be live and in person at the Smoothie King Center. You heard me correctly. The name of the arena is the Smoothie King Center, and he is the Juice, Dave Sadler. And how's it going, Dave?
Good. I hope the Smoothie King walks somebody out to the ring, a la Anderson Silva.
How much do you think a smoothie cost at the Smoothie King Center? That's one thing you're going to have to find out when you're down there.
If I go there and it's not this big, I'm going to be very upset.
Well, they'll probably have one that big, but that might be $12. That's what I'm... Maybe that's the sizes that they have. You have the Smoothie Prince, the Smoothie Queen, and then the Smoothie King. And then if you're lucky, maybe Dana White gets the smoothie like Overlord size.
Yeah. It's just a garbage can full of smoothie.
And also you have to report whether it's good.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. Is it good? Is it better than the Jamba Juice? Because it's not the Jamba Juice Center. It's the Smoothie King Center.
No. I would imagine that they're not awful if they paid for the entire arena.
Yeah, you would think. Because I've never heard of, like I said, Jamba Juice is probably the biggest chain I know of just like smoothies.
Where's the Honey Bun Arena?
The Honey Bun Arena?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like, you know, like foods that I like the Dairy Queen Concert Emporium, or, you know.
There's probably, Dairy Queen has something named after him.
Yeah, like a T-ball team.
Or what about they're in Louisville, where the University of Louisville Cardinals play? Their name of their arena is called the KFC Yum Center.
That's a good one.
That's the actual name of the arena.
How about the we're all right arena?
I'd pay for that. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's really not bad.
All right, well, let's get on to some headlines here, and let's start off with let's keep the kind of some of the comedic up here on the show, comedic value. Ronda Rousey, who previously used to before she became UFC champion and movie star and model and all this stuff, she used to drive a 2005 Honda Accord LX. That car, as of right now, has more than 150,000 miles. Not only did it serve as her vehicle, but also as her living residence on her way to becoming a UFC champion. And that car, along with some of her personal belongings, went to eBay recently. And I believe the auction is still going on, if I'm not mistaken here, Dave.
It is.
And I think this was the starting price, $6,100.
Yeah, I've seen screenshots of it up over 12.
Okay, so it's gone over 12,000 now, which obviously is way more than a 2005 Honda Accord with over 150,000 miles is worth. But you have the allure of getting Ronda Rousey's car, and I think wasn't there supposed to be some? Yeah, Ronda has left some medals, patches, coins, and figurines inside the car. So who knows what rare items of Ronda Rousey's that you may find that you could sell off and try to recoup some of that money for overpaying for a Honda Accord.
Yeah, maybe Brendan Schaub's dignity is in the car.
Oh man,
that's funny. That is funny.
You'd be surprised.
Hold on a second here. It's up over like 12,000, and I'm trying to find UFC 189. That's Aldo and McGregor, right?
Right. She is the pay-per-view after 190.
So currently I have found 2 floor seats. Oh, 3 floor seats available, and I'm at 10,500. Or you can have a crappy used car that a champion has. So it's up to you, folks. 3 floor seats, not together, or 1 crappy car.
That will probably still climb up. How much does the auction have left on it time wise?
I'm efforting that
Because it went live as of June 1st, I think. So it should still have like 5 days left, perhaps.
UFC Bantamweight Champion Ronda Rousey Honda Accord 2005. 16,100. It has 5 days left.
Wow. So it's already gone up $10,000 in 2 days.
It's ridiculous.
That's something at least to keep an eye on. I'm not sure who these people are bidding on it. They obviously have money. Yeah. Interesting. All right, so that's a fun story to keep interesting. Speaking of not so happy of a story here, Dave. Sticking to California here and sticking to women's MMA. This past weekend in San Francisco, a couple of Cesar Gracie fighters, Leslie Smith and Heather Jo Clark, were at a club, and there was another couple women with those 2 UFC fighters. And I guess one of the women that was with them got touched inappropriately by a male at this club in San Francisco. Leslie Smith took grievance to that and asked the man to stop. The man said, I could do whatever I want. And she proceeded to beat the living snot out of this dude who was much bigger than her and show him a lesson. I guess Heather Clark kind of came in the end to finish up. And afterwards, after getting his nose broken and pretty bloodied, I guess the guy finally then apologized to the 2 UFC female fighters. And, in this day and age, this kind of goes to show you, you better watch out. You never know what that other person possesses. And I think in the case of this young man, he learned pretty quickly that some people you just don't want to mess with, regardless of how big you are or how small they are.
I'm fairly certain that Leslie Smith did all the beating because Heather Clark is not one to get into a fight. Oh, I screwed that up.
Close enough.
Where's the... Oh, here it is. Hey!
We got it. She's a boring fighter.
Yeah. She probably just nagged that guy for like 15 minutes.
Oh, man, probably.
I don't care if you don't like me. I don't care. I'm just here to win fights.
My knee hurts, though.
Pretty funny.
No, but, for Leslie Smith, who was kind of down there after getting her ear busted by Jessica Ai, even though this wasn't a UFC fight, she's kind of back. Maybe she gained some fans she might have lost after that performance.
Yeah, maybe the gentleman didn't touch her inappropriately. Maybe he was talking into her bad ear, and he was just trying to get her attention. No, nothing?
I don't know. Maybe, but... well, it's an interesting story it came across, and yeah, that guy obviously is not a fan of the UFC, so he'll have to... We'll see if that changes his mind at all. All right. Also, this weekend, if you did know, you probably didn't. I actually just realized it was going on this weekend. World Series of Fighting 21, June 5th, NBC Sports from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Lance Palmer will defend his World Series of Fighting featherweight title against former WEC and UFC fighter Chris Hordecki. Other than that, there's really not much on this card. Unfortunately, no Ben Fodor, a.k.a. Phoenix Jones, the superhero. I don't know why they couldn't get that guy back on, but with him not on there, Dave, I'm kind of losing interest. Lance Palmer, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, trains with Team Alpha Male, former All-American at Ohio State, great wrestler, but I don't know. He's been good. He's won fights, obviously, in the World Series of Fighting, but he definitely hasn't been the most exciting guy that, as far as their champions have had the offer so far.
Yeah, he probably had lots of superhero things to do.
That's true.
A convention or something.
Possibly.
But, yeah. Uh, you know, it'd probably be an okay card, probably worth DVRing, but there's been very little. I watch the NBC Sports Network, and I haven't seen them advertise it very much, so that's weird. You know, it's worth tuning in. It's free, but yeah, that's a little weird that there's been zero press. Usually, like when I'm surfing the internet, those ads pop up, like because, they know that I search MMA all the time. I haven't seen any banner ads or anything for it.
Right, and you would think with all the hockey that NBC Sports shows.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're really trying to promoting their next event, which isn't until August 1st. And I think that's the one that everyone is legitimately interested in seeing, Jake Shields against Paul Ares. But if you're going to try to promote, have this event a month before, there shouldn't be that much conflict of interest.
Yeah. Speaking, watch this transition. You ready for this? Speaking of awful events, you know that Kimbo and Ken is getting ready to come up?
Yes, we are 17 days or 16 days from Kimbo Shamrock. Unfinished business.
Okay. Nobody's going to get finished in this business is what they should call it. That doesn't have the same ring to it.
It should be they will be entering the cage on crutches.
Yeah. So somebody at my work asked me a question about, why doesn't Bellator do more stuff like this to gain fans? And we got into a nice little argument, and I'll throw it up to you. Everybody that's on this card, well, first of all, if you're Bellator, the whole card has to be on Spike. Every fight needs to be on Spike. And every fight needs to have a guy that's some sort of character or that there's some sort of story. Like, relaunch your brand. You know what I mean? Because eyes will be on your product for this train wreck. But the fact that they're putting on guys, I'm looking at it right now. Pitbull and Weichel is fighting. Nobody knows who Daniel Weichel is. Nobody who's tuning in to watch Kimbo knows who that is. Like the Bobby Lashley fight, that's cool because he's, huge guy, looks the part and all that kind of stuff. There's some good fights on here, but they need to have the whole card, and they need to there's a perfect opportunity for them to promote up-and-coming stars in Bellator because you're not going to be able to keep pulling Kimbo and Ken to get ratings.
Did you know there's 14 fights scheduled for this card?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
There is.
That's the most I've seen. The UFC typically doesn't go over 12. Bellator here at 14. I'm assuming the fights were obviously we're getting Kimbo and Shamrock as the main event. Patricio Pitbull against Daniel Weichel for the featherweight title will be the co-main event. We also got James Thompson, Bobby Lashley, Daniel Strauss, Henry Corrales. I'd imagine Michael Chandler and Derek Campos to round out the main card. And then maybe, I don't know if they're planning, but I honestly think the Justin Lawrence, Sean Wilson fight, I think if that one, maybe that'd be a good one to kind of sneak in. The rest is a lot of regional guys, a lot of unknown guys. With the exception of Adam Sella. Of course, he's famous for getting knocked out by Uriah Hall on The Ultimate Fighter. He's on the undercard. But so there are a lot of interesting fights on this card. And to your friend that kind of brought up, why don't they do this more often? Did he not remember in November when they had Tito fight Stephan Bonner?
That was his point, that, a lot of people watched that fight, and I don't know if a lot of people watched that fight.
Well, I think it was the highest rated TV card of last year.
Well,
I think I'm almost certain.
To take it from pro wrestling, you need to build up the stars. So I understand that point. Like, people are going to watch the train wreck regardless of their skill sets and, what they've done prior to this. But you have to get other people out there. Like, it needs to be a loaded card, I think. And like I said, put it on Spike all day and launch it as like, the most, I don't know. There's got to be a way that they can promote it. Like show the Fight Master all morning. You know what I mean? And then have one of the guys, whoever won Fight Master, or one of the guys from Fight Master, have them fight on the card to where there's build up. There's just no build up, and when they don't run a show every week, every couple of weeks, it's hard to follow these guys.
I think that this in itself, them naming it, has gotten buzz, and a lot of people, I think, are hearing about it. I think it's a solid card. Like I said, the main card running off, I think, is solid. Like I said, the bottom end with all those local guys, they're not going to run all the fights there on Spike. Like I said, 5 or 6. I think that why they don't do it more often, why they don't throw in names, I guess, is because you are trying to build up your brand. Because at the end of the day, these two guys are not stars that Bellator came up with. Right. Ken Shamrock made his name in the UFC and the WWE, and of course, Kimbo Slice, really made his name on YouTube, but more recently, obviously, fought in the UFC. So I think, and then same thing with the Bonner and Tito thing. So I think it's something they don't want to do too often, because even though it's in the Bellator banner, you're selling people that made their money elsewhere, that had their prime elsewhere. So people always are going to talk about where their prime was and when they were good, regardless whether it ends up being a good fight or a train wreck, as most people predict. So that's why you can't have these type of fights all the time. And I think Scott Coker realizes that, but he also realizes the potential in having 1 or 2 or 3 of these fights per year to kind of draw the casual fan, to draw some interest, to get those people tuned to their other shows that have their top stars, like a Douglas Lima or a Michael Chandler or Alexander Volkov or a Daniel Strauss. You get what I'm saying here.
Right. Just for the record, Jim, you are very much available 4th row, right along the ring, right along the ramp. $212 a ticket. Get as many as you want. The VIP, which includes a photo op with Royce Gracie and Fedor, $413 a ticket.
That's not a bad deal.
It's
I'll be honest. And how much did you say the seats were at? 189 again?
Yeah, no kidding, right?
What's the percentage difference there?
Yeah, 30. What did I say? $3,500 a piece.
Yeah, so that's like it's like an 80% difference in price, some ridiculous thing like that. Yeah, that's a big difference.
But the talent level's 80%.
Right. But I mean, if you look at the bang for your buck, though, you're going to get 14 fights. You're going to get autographs and pictures with Royce Gracie and Fedor Emelianenko, and you're going to sit like cage side.
Yeah,
that's not a bad deal. That's a good deal. If you're in or around St. Louis come June 19th, I'd say that's a pretty good bargain. All right. Well, obviously, we'll pick those fights coming up here in 16 days. So let's get to the fights that happened last weekend down in Goiania, Brazil. Carlos Condit against Thiago Alves was the main event, but the first fight of the evening was in the welterweight division as newcomer to the UFC, Darren Till took on Wendell Oliveira. And after a very uneventful first round, Dave, between Oliveira and Till was able to get this fight to a ground, get the fight to a ground during a scramble, and then was able to position a half guard, and then just kind of started unloading elbows, and you really don't think much of it. Then all of a sudden you kind of look and you see Oliveira just kind of go limp and not protecting himself anymore. And the referee had to come up and stop this one at the 137 marker in the second round to dead silence. It was an exciting knockout followed by no crowd reaction. And I get that Oliveira is Brazilian and Till's the American. He's the underdog. You're not supposed to root for him. But that's one of the most brutal knockouts you ever see. with nobody caring. I mean, it was incredible how silent the crowd was as that went down. They were all kind of collectively like, did that just happen? You know, it's like
Right.
they were all stunned. The official attendance was, I want to say, I think it was 3,500. I mean, I know that's not a lot of people, but in that small of a venue, you know, you could still hear him. So he silenced 3,500 people with that knockout.
Yeah, it was. Elbows are nasty when they work, and Mr. Till made him work. It's pretty devastating. Didn't see it coming at all, and then bam. You know, once he got the one, Oliveira didn't like that, and then he hit him with, you know, more and more, and it's a wrap, son.
And for Till, just real quickly, you know, short notice, has to fly to Brazil. You know, gets this knockout. You know, I don't know what's next for him, but you know, he's definitely going to be rewarded nicely, probably with another main card spot. You know, doing what he was able to do down here in Brazil.
Yeah, where's he from?
Let me see where he's fighting out of. He's listed.
Fights out of Brazil, from England.
Oh, so Darren Till's from England?
Yeah.
Okay. But I think he does train in the U.S. now. If I'm
yeah, it
not
doesn't
mistaken.
say who his camp is or anything where I'm looking. No, you're right. He'll probably get something nice. I wouldn't even be surprised if it's on a Brazil card. You know, another main event on a Brazil card. Main card spot, not a main event.
Let's get to the next fight of the evening in the lightweight division as Francisco Trinaldo took on former Ultimate Fighter winner Stormin Norman Park. And in this fight, Dave, I don't know if it was all Trinaldo or maybe Park just not being as in good a shape as we've seen in previous fights, but I just felt like Norman Park didn't bring it on this night in Brazil. It just didn't seem like he had it. We've seen great performances from him standing up and also with his grappling, and it just didn't seem like he had the ability to kind of pull the trigger in either one. He wasn't very successful in the takedowns. He was only 4 of 12. He landed 2 in the third round, which was probably the only round for 100% certainty you can say he won. The second round, Trinaldo just dominated him, outstriking Park 39-14, and also Park was 0 for 6 on takedowns. The first round was close, even though Trinaldo outstruck Park pretty handily, 20-6. Park was able to control landing 2 takedowns. So that round was pretty close, but the judges saw it unanimous decision, 29-28, twice for Francisco Trinaldo. I'm sorry, yeah, it says unanimous, but that was a split decision, so I don't know why it says unanimous. But either way, 2 judges saw it the way of Trinaldo. He got the win. And I think for Park, second time in a row, he didn't use his footwork. You know, he didn't try to throw a lot of feints. And I don't know if it was getting tagged early. I don't know if it was the heat being in Brazil, but he's going to kind of have to reassess, you know, his game plan, his plan of attack, because I feel like this is the second fight in a row, Dave. He's kind of fell flat. Give all the credit in the world to Trinaldo. He followed his game plan. He knew he needed to strike with Park. He really didn't want to grapple with him. He was able to do that. He got the win, and I think obviously did more and deserves the win. But yeah, Park's definitely going to have to reassess things here moving forward.
Yeah, after that first fight, I was rather excited to see the rest of the card. The prelims ended with a submission, and then we got a knockout, and then the next 2 fights happened. You know, we'll talk about the Jimmo fight in a second, but yeah, that wasn't the Norman Park that we were used to seeing, and it just he's better than that. Not to sound like a high school coach, but he's better than that. And he just didn't perform. And like you said, who knows what it's from? But can't do that one more time. You do that, you'll be on the World Series of Fighting card that nobody's watching.
The next fight of the evening was in the light heavyweight division as Francimar, what was calling him, Bahos?
I
believe that's how they were pronouncing his last name.
Yeah.
Francimar Bahos against Ryan Jimmo. This fight just stunk. There's really no way to say it. Boetsch was 0 for 14 on takedowns.
Now, see, we don't even need to talk about the fight. What we need to talk about is the fact that how can you go 0 for 14 in takedowns and Jimmo not get any credit for that, for stopping those takedowns?
Well, that's what happens when you get outstruck 67 to 46 and throw about 50 less strikes than your opponent.
But if he took the time to attempt 14 takedowns, I fail to believe that he shouldn't get points for defending that takedown.
He should, but I think he was so worried about him taking him down, he was not as active as a striking. And obviously, he tried 6 takedowns in the first and then 4 in the preceding rounds, that being Boetsch. But Jimmo, after the first round, which I would have gave to Jimmo, Dave, the next 2 rounds were pretty close, but they were both pretty bad. Neither guy was really landing anything. And then, of course, you had the half-hearted / skill-wise attempts of taking him down. And for Jimmo, this is a situation where, to me, it's more on him than Boetsch. Boetsch tried to implement a game plan of taking him down and being on top. It didn't work out. He maybe should have tried more stand-up, and I think he kind of did that a little bit towards the end. But for Jimmo, he needed to explode more. I mean, how much of that fight was he spent with his back up against the cage?
Right.
And I get it. He did stop those takedown, Daves, and he should get credit for that. But he had to do something more than just kind of sitting there waiting for the ref to kind of come in there and stop him. There was no explosion. There was no elbows. There's no knees. There was nothing Boetsch had to worry about other than not getting the takedown, other than him just being denied that. And this is kind of after that first knockout he's had in the UFC, Dave, which I think was Anthony Perosh. Jimmo has not looked really good, and this is kind of how he's lost the majority of fights. People get him in the clinch, and then he just doesn't have an answer for it.
Yeah, I have a joke. Would you say that Jimmo's best bet would be to take him to deep water?
Yeah, I mean...
See what I did there?
Yeah, I see what you did there.
If you're watching the live show or the tape show on YouTube, youtube.com/BeyondCage podcast, that was hilarious. If not, well, go on YouTube.
Yeah, well, it's just, that was a disappointing fight. I thought Jimmo was going to perform a lot better. I don't blame Boetsch. Is one of the reasons why I didn't pick him. I mean, he lost to Hans Stringer, so that was kind of like my whole argument in breaking down the fight, that this guy's not that good. So for Jimmo, obviously they made a cut list here this past week. Guys like Tim Elliott got cut, a lot of 125ers. I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Jimmo we see getting cut here soon, because he just has not performed as of late.
Yeah, especially with the talking about the deal, the Reebok deal, and then coming out and have a stinker like that. Not the best weekend for Mr. Jimmo.
The next fight of the evening in the lightweight division, Alex Oliveira against KJ Nunes. And KJ Nunes obviously landed some good strikes in this fight early on, but then Oliveira was able to land 3 takedowns inside the first 3 minutes here. And while Nunes was able to get up quick on most of them, the third one is what did the trouble for the Hawaiian, as the third time Oliveira was able to get the back. And you kind of see KJ Nunes look up, kind of looking at the clock, kind of composing himself, kind of going, all right, I'm okay. I'm good. And I think kind of that little brief moment of clarity, however you want to look at it, let his guard down. And then Oliveira just swooped in, got the rear naked choke, and got the tap at the 251 marker. And a big win for Oliveira, especially after his last fight. He kind of went from winning to losing very quickly there against Gilbert Burns. He beats a very highly touted fighter here in KJ Nunes. And for Nunes, he obviously say what you will about that fight against Darren Cruikshank. I think he was at least losing that fight up until the eye pokes caused a no contest. He now gets submitted. And also the whole time this fight's going on, even though it only lasted 3 minutes, you hear Ank and Stan constantly talking about, well, he's thinking about moving up to 170 and stuff. And even though he had a great fight against Nick Diaz in Strikeforce, arguably one of the best fights, not just in Strikeforce, but probably one of the best fights you'll ever see, KJ Noon's Nick Diaz 2 for their welterweight title. You lose to a guy like Oliveira. I'm not sure if moving up is, the answer to solving your career problems. That's not the best way to move up to 170.
Yeah. It seems to be the go-to. It's almost like their go-to line. Like, when somebody who's a name who has been around a while, hey, KJ Noons should go up to 170. Hey, don't you think Faber should stay at 145? It just seems like it's like their go-to move now. And it's not always the answer, Jim. Sometimes it's just time to go.
And it's kind of surprising that Noons had this fight because, as fans of the show know, we're good friends with Darren Cruikshank. We had him on after the bout against KJ Noons, and also we had him before his bout there at UFC 185 against Beneil Dariush. Both times, obviously, talking about the situation with KJ Noons. And it sounded like Noons was ready to retire and go back to school to try to get his degree. And then all of a sudden, he ends up fighting Alex Oliveira down here in Brazil. And obviously, Darren really wants that fight back. Darren really wants to fight KJ Noons. So kind of if you look at how this all situation played out, Darren takes that fight, with James Krause. It's kind of amazing to me that somehow I guarantee, even though Darren said maybe it's because it was going to be in Brazil, but I guarantee if the UFC said, hey, Darren, you got to fight in Brazil. We know you kind of want to keep to, the United States and Canada, but you get KJ Noons again. I guarantee Darren would have took that fight.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of surprising me about this whole situation with KJ Noons.
Well, the only way that he's going to get that fight back now is if he loses. So, Darren's on his way up, and KJ is sadly on his way down.
Well, big win for Oliveira there, so we'll see what's next for him. But yeah, kind of a uncertain future there for Mr. Noons. So let's get on to the co-main event of the evening at 145 pounds as Charles Oliveira took on Nick Lentz. This ended up being the fight of the night and also netted a performance bonus there for Mr. Oliveira. And the first round was actually pretty close, at least to start out, as both guys were throwing strikes. But then towards the end there, Oliveira actually landed a takedown and started raining a lot of punches on Nick Lentz, ended up outstriking him 52-34 in that frame. And Oliveira did a great job of shutting Lentz down in the takedown department, stopping all 6 of Lentz's takedown attempts. And then in round number 2, Lentz was able to break through, land 2 of 3 takedowns. He got outstruck by 2, but obviously with those 2 takedowns, definitely controlled that round and probably would have gave him that round. So heading into round 3, 1 round apiece of, again, was a lot of back and forth between both men with the striking and the grappling and submissions and all that. And then in round 3, I don't know if it was conditioning or just Oliveira once again knowing seizing an opportunity, just grabs onto that neck very early in round number 3 after a takedown attempt by Nick Lentz, gets the guillotine choke and gets the tap there at 110 into the 3rd round. And once again, Charles Oliveira wins by submission. And I knew it before this fight, Dave, and I pretty much have said it since he beat Hatsuyoki. This guy can submit anyone at 145 pounds. But you add in his improving takedown defense in this fight, improved conditioning, because he looked a lot better conditioned in this fight than he did back in December against Jeremy Stevens. And also, once again, it seems like every fight we've seen him, I want to say since the Frankie Edgar fight, in terms of his striking has improved vastly. And to me, even though he got the win against Stevens, I think for all that fight wasn't, he put that on display in Brazil, in his home country. And now Charles Oliveira, to me, is maybe 1 fight away from a title shot. I think he's that close. He's a hot prospect. He's a young guy. He's on a roll. And obviously, like I said, I think he can submit anybody in this division.
Yeah, Du Bronx is just doing work. Oliveira is one of those guys that I've said it before about different guys in different divisions, like Neil Magny at welterweight. That guy's going to be a tricky proposition for just about anybody in the division. And I feel the same way about Charles Oliveira. And who's that other guy that I like that he just keeps getting better? Michael Johnson, I always bring him up. And then there's God, who's the other guy? He looks like Oliveira. He just keeps submitting fools and man, drawing a blank. But anyway, Oliveira goes out there. He continues doing what he's doing. They've got him ranked 7th at featherweight, according to the UFC's rankings. He goes out there. 3 of his last 4 wins are all finishes, which the UFC loves that. And when somebody like him asks for a title shot, they're probably a little more willing to give it to him. Maybe 1 or 2 more victories. But, yeah, big things for Oliveira.
Now, a lot of people are clamoring for Oliveira against Max Holloway next, which to me, I think is a tremendous fight. And obviously, to me, the winner of that fight most certainly puts himself in line for a title shot after Frankie Edgar, of course, who I think it's the winner of Aldo and McGregor. But what do you think about that possible matchup coming up?
That's a good one. I'm trying to see here what they have for their rankings. Featherweight.
Looking at our rankings, Dave, that are recently updated on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast, we have Oliveira with this most recent victory at number 5, and we have Mr. Max Holloway now at number 6.
I would look at them right this second, but my Facebook won't load. Okay, here we go. The monthly rankings continue. All right. Let me see here. Just want to see if there's another option, because the top.
I think also Chad Mendez is an option for Oliveira as well, as much as it is Holloway. But that obviously would be a fight I'd like to see. And then, you kind of mentioned it earlier, but if Uriah Faber is content staying at 145, even coming off a loss, I think Oliveira against Faber also would be a tremendous matchup.
Yeah. Looking at the Oliveira Holloway wouldn't be terrible, but I think that they both have similar styles, and I wouldn't mind actually seeing like Oliveira Lamas and Holloway Mendez, perhaps. There's a couple different options because, all those, I think the top 6 that we have listed, Aldo, Mendez, Edgar, McGregor, Oliveira, Holloway, and Lamas, and even Swanson at 8, I think you could throw them in any different type of matchups, and they all wouldn't be half bad.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, like I said, because they're both young guys, I believe Max Holloway is 23, if I'm not mistaken. And Oliveira, let's see, he is turning 26 this year, so he's 25. You kind of have the lure of like 2 young guns as well, and that could maybe factor in as well. But yeah, that's either way, they got some exciting matchups to get some number 1 contenders here at 145.
Yeah, let's load them up. Come on, Sean Shelby, get to work.
The main event of the evening in the welterweight division, Carlos Condit against Thiago Alves. And looking at this matchup, after kind of a brief feeling out period in most of that first round, I will say, though, it seemed like Condit not moving as well as we've seen in past, maybe trying to take it easy, not to kind of re-aggravate the ACL there. And I think maybe learn, I got to move around more, or I got to be more active, because if I kind of sit here with the pocket, I'm going to take some big shots and I'm getting Alves a better chance to hit me. And if you look at the striking numbers, Condit was definitely more active as he threw 82 strikes, just 39 for Alves, but both were about the same level of accuracy in terms of landed, 24 for Condit, 23 for Alves. And even though that's a lot of output, Dave, I mean, 82 thrown strikes in one round. Like I said, I think he started to not only have a little more output, but I think more diversity. And I think that's what kind of was the downfall there with Thiago Alves, because obviously he needed to be in closer for this matchup. He kind of had to eat those shots that maybe someone that was, a little longer, a little rangier could move out of the way with. Alves kind of doesn't have that luxury, only being 5'9", and kind of just got blitzkrieg there and didn't really have an answer for the strikes. How do you like getting outstruck, Dave? 83-12 in the second round. Not to mention Carlos, he said, what the heck, I'll try a couple takedowns. Landed 2 takedowns as well and just beat Alves to a pulp here in the second round. And in between rounds 2 and 3, I guess it was his eye, his nose, I don't know, something. The doctors were concerned about the face. I'll just put the face of Thiago Alves. They were concerned about it taking more punishment and decided to stop this one in between rounds. But for a guy that had a very serious injury in his last fight against Tyron Woodley, take on a very tough competitor in Thiago Alves in his home country, Carlos Condit looked just as good as he's ever looked in the octagon.
Yeah, Condit looked like he was back, obviously. As a kind of a disclaimer, my DVR didn't record the last fight, which I'm real happy about. But I got to see all the post-fight stuff. So I didn't see a whole lot of the first round, but the second round, I mean, it looked like Condit kind of got his feet wet in the first 5 minutes. And then as the second round started going, it seemed like he started to feel more comfortable, starting to get the feel back. Luckily, it was somebody like Thiago Alves that he was fighting and not somebody like a Johnny Hendricks or a Robbie Lawler. I think this was a perfect fight for him to take coming off of the injury. There's quite a bit of intrigue just throwing Carlos Condit back in to the welterweight division talk. I mean, he never really left, but not being around, not fighting, kind of keeps him out of the limelight. So he's back, and I'm sure if he can, he's ready to get right back in there.
And kind of looking at just real quickly, Fight Metric kind of has a breakdown of the stats. And obviously one of the reasons Thiago Alves has been so successful in his career, he's thrown a lot of heavy leg kicks. And if you look at the breakdown, he threw only 15 leg strikes in the first round. And then looking at round 2, he was only able to throw 5. And I think for Thiago Alves against a guy like Carlos Condit, especially coming off that injury, you would have thought maybe his game plan was to throw more leg kicks to kind of test that leg out. And
leg kicks are the most underutilized strike in MMA.
I'm just saying, again, in that fight, I think that would have been something Alves should have went to more.
There was a fight, I think it was, did you watch the Dalby Santos fight?
Was this on the undercard?
It was.
I did not, but it was a split decision win for Dalby.
Yeah, I believe it was Dalby that, like, man, his kicks, it sounded like he was chopping a tree down. It was brutal. I was watching on my laptop, and I was playing on Xbox, and the kick like startled me to where I was like, what was that? Like it was bad. And Dos Santos, his opponent, was not happy about it. Obviously.
Well, let's get to this weekend's action in New Orleans, UFC Fight Night, Boetsch versus Henderson. 6 fights on the main card here for Fox Sports 1. Of course, we got to give a shout-out to our friend of the show, Brian Ebersol. We interviewed him up ahead of his fight against Omari Akhmedov in the welterweight division. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that interview yet, it's right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. And it's Brian Ebersol, UFC Fight Night New Orleans interview. Check it out. Brian, great as always in the interviews, sharing some enlightenment about fighter management, Reebok deal, obviously his fight here with Omari, and what he's been doing since moving back to the United States from Thailand. So we had a lot of fun talking to Brian, so check out that interview. And like I said, let's get to the main card here. First fight of the evening in the bantamweight division as Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres takes on Francisco Rivero. And I'm going to be honest, Dave. I think this is a very tough fight for Bruce Leroy. He's going to be slightly taller, a little longer, but even though he lost to Uriah Faber, well, I guess they both did, but yeah. Rivera, kind of in that controversial fashion. I just think Rivera is just a tough dude. I just think he has that grittiness. Not saying that Alex Caceres can't be exciting or he can't do finishes or he can't compete with Rivera, but I just feel like Rivera has that nastiness that some guys don't. That gives him an edge, and I think always is something that you got to look out for, and is something that no matter how the fight goes, you feel like they can do something to counteract what their opponent does, even if they're losing. Like he's never out of the fight, and that's maybe not the most technical breakdown in the world, but I just feel if Rivera gets on top of Bruce Leroy, I don't care how good Bruce Leroy's triangle choke. I just feel like Rivera's just gonna beat him up. I don't know. I just had that feeling, Dave. That's kind of the feeling I get from this matchup, and I'm not sure if there's something Caceres can do to really phase Francisco Rivera. That's kind of the feeling I get with this matchup.
Yeah, it's weird that you said that, like, about how, how much more, I guess, brutal is a good word to describe Rivera. How much more aggressive in everything he is. But it seems like nothing phases Bruce Leroy. He's usually a pretty calm cat, smiling all the time, just kind of enjoying the moment. He's a very intelligent guy if you listen to him talk in his interviews. It's weird. If he can remain calm and just kind of be in his spot during the fight, does that allow – I mean, does that counterbalance? Does that counterbalance Rivera, his does that counterbalance all that? Because one guy's overly aggressive, one guy's really calm. It's kind of like a yin-yang approach, I guess. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Both of these guys' jobs are on the line, I think, as well. They're both coming off.
Yeah, they're both coming off of 2 losses. And just also an interesting note, Caceres has never been knocked out in 17 fights. Just a little fun fact there. But yeah, Bruce Leroy's coming off loss to Uriah Faber, and then probably the more disappointing one, losing his last fight to Masanori Kanehara back in Japan in September. And Rivera is coming off the loss to 2 top 10 guys in Mizugaki and, the Faber with the eye pokes there. So like you said, you also got to add in that, back against the wall. But it's an interesting matchup. I like it, and I think it's a great fight to kick off this card.
Yep.
The next fight of the evening will also be in the bantamweight division as a former Bellator featherweight champion, and I guess you can technically call him a UFC title contender as well. Joe Soto will take on former MFC bantamweight champion Anthony Burchak. And believe it or not, fans may remember, we actually got to interview Anthony Burchak. It was supposed to be his first title defense, I think, in the MFC. And he ended up getting injured pulling out of that card. And with that injury, I guess Burchak took that opportunity upon himself to renegotiate his deal. And months later, he ended up signing with the UFC, fought in his home state of Arizona, but lost in his debut to Ian Adtwistle. Got submitted there in the first round. So looking to bounce back from that, 11-2 in his career with 6 submissions. To his credit, Joe Soto, after leaving Bellator, dropped down a division, fought mostly in the Taipachi Palace organization before coming to the UFC, ended off running 6 straight victories in a row before being signed to the UFC 177 card, and then, of course, ended up moving up to the main event, lasting almost 25 minutes with the champion TJ Dillashaw, getting knocked out eventually in the 5th round. Overall record 15-3, with 8 of those victories coming by submission. And I think Burchak, he has that bad taste in his mouth. He finally got to the UFC. He's fighting in his home state, and he gets submitted in the first round. So you got to wonder in this fight here, Dave, in New Orleans, if he's going to come out maybe a little more aggressive than we've seen Anthony Burchak back in his MFC days. And for Joe Soto, here's a guy that, here's his chance to kind of show everybody why he was picked on a day's notice to fight TJ Dillashaw. Here's his chance to kind of cement, like, here's why I got picked, and here's why I'm a top 10 guy in this division, and here's why I should be on my way to another shot at the title. Both guys have a lot to prove in this fight. I think both guys are actually really good strikers. The difference, I think, will be the grappling. Obviously, Burchak getting submitted in the first round in his last fight, that never looks good. And Soto does have some submissions, but if you look at the majority of his career, it's been stand-up. So I actually just think we're just going to see a 15-minute war, and I'm not sure who's going to be left standing, but I think it's going to be a good one.
I'm trying to find, my computer's going slow here. This was his first fight. The Dillashaw was the first one, right?
It was his first and only fight in the UFC so far.
Yeah, and prior to that, nothing but finishes, submissions, TKOs.
In that 6-fight winning streak he had leading up to his debut, he only had one decision, all 4 submissions with 1 knockout.
Yeah,
in that time in Taipachi Palace.
Yeah, and if you go down even further, long story short, Joe Soto's a finisher. A lot of people were very impressed with what he did at 177 against Dillashaw, as well they should be. Burchak is a guy that you can't really sleep on. He's a former champion. Excuse me. He's a former champion and everything outside of the organization. And, this is a fight to determine, who's ready to be in that top 15, who's ready to take that next step forward. And, this is another good fight that, once again, these free cards, Jim, they're loaded. You just have to, do a little digging on the guys, but you'll see that this card is actually a pretty good card.
The next fight of the evening will be in the featherweight division, as Thiago Tavares will take on Brian Ortega. Actually, featherweight division. Thiago Tavares obviously is UFC fans and has a long UFC tenure, but only recently has moved down to 145 pounds. Most recently, in his new weight class, he submitted Robbie Peralta back in the first round in August in Maine, the Bader St. Preux card. Overall record 9-5 with 1 draw, 13 of 19 victories by submission. He is taking on the undefeated Brian Ortega, 8-0 in his career with a new contest, and that no contest came in his UFC debut at UFC on Fox 12 in July of last year, and that fight was overturned by the California State Athletic Commission. Of his 8 career victories, 4 are by submission. Now, I don't really remember his debut, that being Ortega against Mike De La Torre, but Thiago Tavares is a very tough individual, and he was a pretty solid guy at 155. I think at 145, you add in his size, his strength, and just submission ability, which may only be second to Charles Oliveira. This guy is very dangerous, and for a young kid, 8-0, who hasn't fought in about a year, I don't know if he's ready for a guy the caliber of Thiago Tavares.
Yeah, kind of what I was thinking. I think Tavares, much like you said about, you just kind of had a feeling in the Rivera Bruce Leroy fight, kind of feel the same way. I think that Tavares is just the better all-around guy coming into this fight, and it's kind of a lot to bite off, I guess, if you're Brian Ortega.
Because if you look at his UFC career, which stems all the way back to April of 2007, Tavares hasn't lost to no-name guys.
Right.
He's lost to Tyson Griffin, Matt Wyman, Kurt Pellegrino. He had a draw against Nick Lentz. He lost to Habib Nurmagomedov. Maybe the only guy that's kind of somewhat of a journeyman that he lost to, Shane Roller. But, I mean, he's beaten guys like Sam Stout, Spencer Fisher, Justin Salas, Manny Gambirian, Michihiro Omagawa. I mean, he's beaten some quality names in his UFC tenure.
Yeah. It's interesting when you were reading the names back, Jim. He has beat guys that he's supposed to beat, but he's never really been like thrown to the wolves. Like, here's the guy. Like, if you beat this guy, you're in the top 10, you're in the top 15. He's never really had that chance. And this guy is definitely not this guy's definitely not that guy either.
Right. And as we said, that usually spells a victory for Mr. Tavares.
Oh yeah. It's interesting. I'm surprised this is on the main card and they didn't put the heavyweight fight, Jordan versus Lewis, on right here.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I really thought that that's a main card fight, especially when you add in that Jordan played football at LSU, obviously in Louisiana. He's the crowd favorite there.
I could understand the booking them as the main event of Fox Sports 1 of the prelims if it was going to pay-per-view or Fox, but
right,
the channel's not even going to change.
Right, absolutely. The next fight of the evening, speaking of hometown guys, also formerly from Louisiana, now training at American Top Team over there in Coconut Creek, Florida, is Mr. Dustin Poirier as he takes on the kid Yancy Medeiros. Dustin Poirier, after having a very successful run in the UFC featherweight division, going 8-3, decided earlier this year to move up to 155 pounds. He was very successful in his debut, knocking out Carlos Diego Fajeda at the fight night in Fairfax, Virginia in April, knocking him out in the first round. Of his 17 career victories, 8 are by knockouts. Looking at Yancy Medeiros, after losing to Jim Miller at UFC 172, Dave, he has looked awfully impressive, having that reverse bulldog choke at UFC 177 against Damon Jackson, and then submitting Joe Proctor in the first round back in December at the Tough 20 finale. Yancy Medeiros is now 11-2 with 6 knockouts to his credit, and just has looked all around very dominant, but probably next to Jim Miller, the toughest test of his career for Mr. Medeiros. And even though Poirier, again, now fighting at 155, Medeiros, I think, will be a little longer in terms of the reach. The height's not going to be that much different. Dustin's listed at 5'9", 5'10" for Medeiros. But the thing I would like to see is the conditioning. Obviously, Medeiros hasn't had to go past the middle of the second round in his last couple of fights. He's taken on a guy that was great shape at 145. Is going to be good shape at 155, that being Dustin Poirier. And I'd like to see, as this fight gets deeper, Medeiros still have that same explosiveness, that same power, and the same output that he's kind of had in his last couple fights, taking on a veteran, a guy that's been in there, even in a different division, against some of the top fighters in the world.
Yeah, this is a fight. Poirier wants this. He wanted this as soon as they announced the New Orleans card. One thing, he got pretty emotionally involved in the McGregor fight in the lead up to that. At the weigh-ins, he played into all those games, and he didn't perform well come fight time. If he really wanted this fight, like I said, but he cannot get as emotionally invested as he did in the fight against McGregor. Otherwise, he's going to end up walking out much less happy as he is when he walks out or walks out to the cage. He seems to have all the skills, but sometimes emotions get the best of Dustin Poirier.
But another fight that I think another really exciting matchup, though. Like a lot of these don't get me wrong, I think Thiago Vargas can win. It doesn't mean it won't be exciting, but I mean, if you look at Bruce Leroy and Rivera, Burchak and Soto, and now Poirier and Medeiros, not even thrown out. You mentioned the Sean Jordan fight on the undercard. I think there's a lot of chances to see some really good fights on this card, especially compared to what we saw last weekend.
True.
Especially when you factor that in as well. The co-main event of the evening is in the heavyweight division as Ben Rothwell will take on Matt Mitrione. Looking at Ben Rothwell, winner of his last 2 fights, both of them knockouts, knocking out Brandon Vera and then most recently Alistair Overeem back in September of last year. 34 wins in his career for Mr. Rothwell, 20 of which are by knockout. He's taking on the meathead Matt Mitrione. 8 of 9 victories by knockout, currently on a 3-fight winning streak, knocking out the likes of Sean Jordan, Derek Lewis, and Gabriel Napao Gonzaga, all in the first round. And I got a feeling this fight's going to end a knockout. I think one of these big guys are going to get a hold of each other and get a knockout. I'm kind of, I might give my pick away. I'm kind of leaning towards Mitrione. But to me, the X factor is if Ben Rothwell can use some of that grappling skills. He does have some submission skills, has 11 career submission victories. If he can get this thing in the clinch and get on top and drag this thing out, I think he has a very real chance to win this fight. But if he gets there in a slugfest with Matt Mitrione, I think he's going to find himself on the wrong end of those exchanges, Dave, and find himself knocked out on the canvas.
Yeah, this is interesting. I don't feel like Rothwell was supposed to win either of the 2 fights that he's coming in.
He definitely wasn't supposed to win the Overeem fight. That's for sure.
Right. And I just feel like it's not luck, but I just feel like he's capitalized on an opportunity that a lot of people haven't seen. And I've never said this before, but I think Mitrione might be a more well-rounded fighter. I don't think anyone's ever said that about Mitrione, but just a better athlete, like better at being a big guy than Rothwell.
He's definitely a better athlete, that is for sure.
But
that's something that I think less experience, maybe less ability can kind of make up for.
Right.
Because I think Rothwell's 34-9, and he's fought a lot better guys over his career than Mitrione has.
Right. And the thing, a lot of people forget this, but that win against Brandon Vera, didn't Ben Rothwell get suspended after that?
He was out for about a year before he had that win against Overeem.
Yeah, and remember that Rothwell started his UFC career against Kane at UFC 104. So this is almost like a resurgence 5 years later. Like he's finally starting to get like his feet under him, I guess is a good way of saying it. But is it a little too much of a push too late in his career? I don't know. Mitrione's still a young guy, only 12 fights in the 12 fights as a mixed martial artist. So be an interesting co-main event, as much as it's going to be just as interesting as the main event too.
And speaking of that main event, we have Tim Boetsch against Dan Henderson in the middleweight division. After dropping down to the middleweight division from light heavyweight and racking off 4 consecutive victories, since that point in time in December of 2012, Tim Boetsch has only won 2 of his last 6 fights. Most recently, his last fight was a loss to Talis Leites back at UFC 183 back in January. And looking at Dan Henderson, after getting dismantled by Daniel Cormier at UFC 173 in May of last year, decided to drop back down to middleweight. His re-return to the middleweight division did not go as planned, as he was knocked out by Gegard Mousasi in the first round back in January at UFC on Fox 14. And while Boetsch does possess knockout power and I think can knock out Dan Henderson, it just seems like since kind of that little role I mentioned that Boetsch was on, anytime he's taken on near top 15 or in the top 15 talent, it seems like he hasn't been able to perform. And even though Henderson is now 44 years old, I would still say that he's a guy in the top 15 and a guy that I think is still very talented. And I just don't see how Tim Boetsch, other than a lucky punch, I I just think even at this stage in Henderson's career, I just don't think Boetsch at any point in his career has been good enough to beat Dan Henderson.
Yeah.
And once again, maybe not my most technical of breakdowns, but I'm not saying it's a fluke if Tim Boetsch wins. I'm just saying I'm going to be very surprised if Tim Boetsch can beat Dan Henderson. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, Tim Boetsch he's kind of like Ben Rothwell. He's got lucky a couple times. His comeback victory over Okami. Who saw that? Or was it Sexyama? Or
No, it was Okami. No, you were right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and then he beat CB Dalloway. He had a close fight against Hector Lombard. I mean, remember when he came back and beat Brad Tavares last year?
Yeah, I mean, Boetsch is a serviceable guy. He's it's a fight to where nobody who wins this fight is going to be in title contention at all, ever. And this is just one of those fights where, the crowd's going to be happy. They're going to go see a couple of guys from Louisiana that are on the card that they can cheer for, and they got a big name to say that they saw somebody who's going to be in the Hall of Fame. They saw Dan Henderson. And, I mean, I think if you think much more of it than that, I think you're reaching.
And real quickly, before we get to picks, if Dan Henderson does somehow lose, do you think that forces him into retirement? If he does lose, he would have lost 6 of his last 7 fights, and then you add losing to a guy like Tim Boetsch. I would say if that happens, Dave, I would think it would be time for Dan to consider retirement.
Yeah. I would have to agree.
I mean, even with a win, it's something he obviously can still consider. I'm just saying if he loses, and like I said, you lose 6 of your last 7 fights, with the last one being to a guy like Tim Boetsch, it's start time looking like just be coach full-time there in Temecula.
Agreed.
Well, with that said, like I said, let's get to picks. UFC Fight Night New Orleans. The first fight of the evening, bantamweight division, Bruce Leroy against Francisco Rivera. I like Bruce Leroy. I've always liked Bruce Leroy since his days on The Ultimate Fighter. But like I said, I just think there's an edge to Rivera. And even though Bruce Leroy has always kind of been cool and calm under pressure, I just think that Rivera is going to do something, and Caceres won't be able to answer. So give me Francisco Rivera in this one.
I'm going to take the calm, cool, and collected Bruce Leroy.
Next matchup, also in the bantamweight division, Joe Soto against Anthony Burchak. I know his UFC debut didn't go great, and he's the underdog. A lot of people are picking Joe Soto, but I'm going to go the other way, and I'm going to pick Anthony Burchak. I think he was a lot better than getting submitted in the first round by Hilhook, and I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how good this kid is. So I'm going to go with Anthony Burchak in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with Soto to continue his impressiveness of what he did against Dillashaw, and he'll get back into that contention.
Brian Ortega against Thiago Tavares in the featherweight division. Probably gave our pick away, Dave, earlier, but yeah, this is all Thiago Tavares in this one for me.
I believe so.
155, Dustin Poirier against Yancy Medeiros. I think Medeiros does have the power to knock out Dustin Poirier, but I think Dustin Poirier is a lot more well-rounded and a lot better condition. Add in fighting in his hometown, something he hasn't done in a very, very long time. Give me the diamond Dustin Poirier to win this one.
I'll take Poirier as well.
Co-main events of the evening, heavyweight division, Ben Rothwell against Matt Mitrione. Like we said, Ben Rothwell's kind of had a resurgence of late. He had the big knockout of Overeem, but I just think Matt Mitrione is going to catch him with something in the first round. And Ben Rothwell, even though he's kind of been on a roll as of late, he's also had a lot of bad UFC fights. let's not forget some of the bad fights he had. So I'm going to go with the man from Indiana to win this one.
I'm going to go with Meathead.
In the main event of the evening, Tim Boetsch against Dan Henderson in the middleweight division. Again, I think I gave my pick away, but yeah, I just don't see how Tim Boetsch beats Dan Henderson. And for you, Dave, and the fans there in New Orleans, win or lose, you may see Dan Henderson's last fight. So that's something that may be cool. But yeah, taking the former Pride champion to win this one.
Yeah, I'll go with the H-bomb, Dan Henderson. And in case anybody was wondering, I will also be picking Brian Ebersol to beat Omari Akhmedov on the prelims.
Was there any doubt?
Via decision.
No, but I mean, was there any doubt that you were picking him?
I'm just, all I'm doing is letting people know.
All right. Anything else to add in before we end the show here, Dave?
No. Stay tuned to my Facebook. I'll be in New Orleans. Hopefully I get some cool pictures and post them up there for everybody.
All right. For Dave Sadler, you can follow him on Twitter at Vigilante Juice. I'm your host, Jim Graham, at Jim Graham on Twitter. Thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.